He's becoming.
Now they're out to kick stem.
Those Grateful Dead dudes!
Everyone's a critic.
Back in the 90s, Hollywood had a weird habit. If something was popular, they made a cartoon out of it, even if it had absolutely no business being a cartoon.
RoboCop.
Today we're diving into some of the weirdest examples, horror movies and darker cult hits that somehow got the full Saturday morning treatment. From toxic mutants fighting pollution, to man-eating plants singing show tunes, all the way to the ghost with the most, and classic movie monsters reimagined for kids. They took the gore, the scares, and the adult edge, and turned it into something you could watch with your frosted flakes.
They're great!
So let's start with maybe the most baffling example of all, because the Toxic Avenger, the movie this is based on, is very much not for kids. We're talking over-the-top violence, gore, gross-out humor, tons of nudity. I mean, this is peak trauma entertainment, and somehow in 1991, that became a Saturday morning cartoon? The show was produced by Trauma Entertainment, and it takes the basic idea of the character, Melvin the nerd turned mutated hero, and completely rewires it for kids. Now instead of, melting criminals in horrific ways, or smashing their face with weightlifting equipment, Toxie becomes an environmentally conscious superhero, leading a team called the Toxic Crusaders. The premise is actually kind of amazing in a what kind of drugs were they taking sort of way. Toxie and his fellow mutants protect the fictional town of Tromaville from pollution and evil forces, mainly the villain Dr. Killumoff, an alien who wears a mask so he doesn't have to breathe in the clean air, and who literally wants to destroy the environment. So it's basically Captain Planet, but starring a radioactive janitor from a very R-rated movie. But like all the cartoons from this era, this show existed for one reason, and one reason only:
Merchandising.
There was a full toy line, lunch boxes, and even video games, which is kind of funny when you remember where this whole thing started. As for availability, you can find Toxic Crusaders on Troma's website, which of course is yet another streaming service you have to pay for, but you can also find the show digitally restored on Blu-ray. I actually got mine with the Tox box, a DVD collection of the first 3 movies I think, and the cartoon all in one. But I thought this would be a perfect way to kick off this list, because if the Toxic Avenger can become a kid's cartoon, nothing on this list should surprise you. Now this one people actually remember, because the Beetlejuice cartoon is weirdly beloved, even though it takes the original movie and just completely flips it on its head. In the film, Beetlejuice is basically a chaotic, manipulative creep who spends most of the time trying to force Lydia into marrying him. But in the cartoon, they're just best friends. I mean, it would be weird for Beetlejuice to be trying to marry her, considering cartoon Lydia is even younger than movie Lydia, who was already around, 15 or 16 years old. The show, which premiered in 1989, was developed alongside Tim Burton's company and produced by Nelvana, and instead of sticking to the darker tone of the movie, it leans all the way into surreal comedy. Now, Lydia willingly hangs out with Beetlejuice in the Netherworld, going on bizarre adventures filled with weird creatures, visual gags, and just pure cartoon chaos. Like when Beetlejuice and Lydia were relaxing on the beach, and Beetlejuice tried to get himself a ghoul friend. Get it? Ghoul friend. And fun fact, Lydia is voiced by Alison Court, who you might recognize as Lunette from The Big Comfy Couch. Well, at least if you're from Canada, eh? Though I'm pretty sure it aired in the US too. I also had something of a crush on her when I was young, which might explain my thing with clowns. This isn't one of those cases where they awkwardly try to tone things down and completely miss the point. This feels more like they took the spirit of the character and just turned it into a full-on Looney Tunes style world. It's still creepy, just in a much more friendly, fun house kind of way, which is a pretty big shift from, hey kid, wanna marry this undead con man? The series has been released on DVD in various volumes over the years, and it's apparently available free for streaming on Tubi, though of course not for us Canadians, because we don't get shit. Doesn't matter anyways though, because I have the box set. And while Beetlejuice is definitely tamer than the Toxic Avenger, it's still a pretty strange property to look at and go, yeah, this definitely sounds like a kid show. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is unique in that it was already a joke to begin with. The original movie is basically a low-budget parody of 1950s B-movies. Giant killer tomatoes attacking people, ridiculous acting, intentionally bad humor, so naturally they made it into a cartoon. But what's interesting is the show actually pulls more from the sequels than the original film, because in those later movies the tomatoes start having actual personalities, and that sort of carries over here. The animated series premiered in 1990 and was developed by the same creative team behind the films, which honestly explains a lot. It even brings back John Astin as Dr. Gangrene, the mad scientist villain from the sequels, voicing the character once again in animated form, which is kind of amazing. I mean, who doesn't love Gomez Addams? The premise follows a group of heroes trying to stop Dr. Gangrene, who's creating mutant tomatoes with all kinds of ridiculous abilities. I mean, we're talking about tomatoes that can disguise themselves as humans, tomatoes that can run whole armies, and robotic tomatoes from the future who sound oddly like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The Tomato Task Force, they must be terminated.
And yet somehow it all works. But what really makes this one stand out is how self-aware it is. The show constantly breaks the fourth wall, makes fun of itself, and leans into just how absurd the whole concept is.
Oh no! It's awful! You're being forced to watch reruns of the original Attack of the Killer Tomatoes movies!
It knows this whole thing is stupid and it just goes with it, which honestly might be why it works better than some of the others on this list. But of course, like everything else, there was toys, a video game, the whole deal, because apparently someone thought kids would really connect with Killer Tomatoes. The series has never seen an official DVD release, and it's unlikely it'll ever get one either. You can find TV recordings of the series on YouTube with a couple episodes missing, though if you dig hard enough you can find those too. Out of everything here so far, this might be the one that makes the most sense, because when your source material is already pretty stupid and cartoony, actually turning it into one isn't much of a stretch. Tales from the Crypt Keeper's journey into Saturday morning cartoon is an interesting one, because this didn't just go from horror show to kids cartoon, this one kind of went in a full circle. It started with EC Comics, which despite being horror, were actually written for children. Then years later those comics turned into an adult anthology television show, and then somehow it got turned back into a kids cartoon. The animated series premiered in 1993 and was produced by Nelvana, and instead of adapting the actual stories from the HBO show or the original comics, it shifts into more kid-friendly horror. So no blood, no real death, just spooky situations with life lessons baked in. Because for some reason during the 90s, there had to be some kind of educational element to the show, otherwise parents' groups would throw a fit. Which means the Crypt Keeper goes from, here's a story about a guy getting buried alive, to here's a spooky tale about stealing and consequences. They even added 2 new hosts, the Vault Keeper and the Old Witch, who are actually from the old comics. It wasn't always the Crypt Keeper back then. The DNA of EC Comics was always a mix of horror and dark morality tales, so turning it to something more kid-friendly isn't completely insane, just toned way down. And a fun little personal note, I actually dated a girl who was related to someone that worked on the show. I won't say who, but for a very brief moment, I technically knew someone connected to Tales from the Crypt Keeper. So yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. Tales from the Crypt Keeper had some physical releases, but as far as I can see, they look to be out of print. However, the show is available on the Retro Rerun YouTube channel, though for some reason they removed the intro, which was the best part, and episode 4. While this adaptation works, it still is wild that someone thought tailoring a series known for its violence and sex would be perfect for kids. Like with the previous entry, Little Shop's history goes back a ways, because Little Shop of Horrors, the version most people remember, was already a remake of the original 1960 film, so this thing had been rebooted before rebooting was even a trend. And yes, the 1986 version is a comedy, but it's still got some pretty dark stuff in it. You've got a man-eating plant manipulating people, feeding on human blood, and depending on which version you watch, the plants take over the world and everybody dies. So naturally, they made it into a kids cartoon. The animated series premiered in 1991 and takes the basic setup, Seymour, Audrey, and the plant, but completely flips the tone. Now, Audrey Jr. isn't a manipulative, bloodthirsty monster. He's basically a wisecracking sidekick. Instead of trying to eat people, the plan helps Seymour deal with everyday problems, villains, and cartoon-style situations. And compared to some of the other shows we've talked about, this one definitely feels on the cheaper side. The animation is a lot more basic, a lot more limited, though that could have been a stylistic choice. You can kinda tell they weren't exactly throwing a huge budget at this one, which honestly kind of adds to the charm, or at the very least, it makes it feel even more like one of those weird early 90s cartoons you'd randomly catch once and then never see again. I only have the vaguest memories of this show, and it wasn't until I started working on this list that I was reminded of its existence. Unlike everything else on this list, I don't think it had any kind of merchandise, which isn't that surprising. Little Shop of Horrors has never really been a brand known for its collectibles. The show has never been released on DVD either and isn't streaming anywhere. However, it has been uploaded to YouTube, so if you'd like to watch it, you can find all 12 episodes, just in very poor VHS quality. The Mummy was probably one of the better ideas to be translated into a children's cartoon, because unlike some of the others on this list, The Mummy already feels like a big, almost cartoonish movie. So turning it into an actual cartoon, you can kind of see the wheels turning with this one. The series premiered in 2001 and basically acts as a continuation of the films, specifically following Alex, Rick, and Evelyn, with Alex sort of being the main focus of the show instead of the parents. If you've seen the movies, it's basically more of that. Alex has the bracelet of Anubis, which gives him special powers and connects him to ancient Egyptian mythology. And of course, Imhotep is still around, causing problems. It basically just boils down to ancient curses, mummies, supernatural threats, and the one-off monster here and there. The animation is solid, the designs are recognizable for the most part, and it feels like they actually put some effort into making it match the tone of the films. There were some toys that came out for the show, though they are pretty hard to find, and even harder to come by are some of the promotional toys that were given away by fast food joints like Taco Bell. The show was released on DVD, though it seems to be out of print and fairly expensive, and it appears the only place that streams it is Peacock, which isn't something we get here, and finding it anywhere else online is almost impossible. But as far as adapting The Mummy into a cartoon, I think this one was a no-brainer. The movies were pretty damn popular, and while they can be scary, they're mostly just fun thrill rides, and the cartoon does a decent enough job of capturing their essence. Monster Force isn't based off any old movie. No, it's based off the classic Universal monsters themselves. We're talking Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and of course my personal favorite, the Gill-Man. You know, the characters that basically defined horror. Universal had been trying to do something with these characters forever, and in the mid-90s decided to try and turn them into a children's cartoon show. The show premiered in 1994 and follows Dr. Reed Crawley and a team of college-age monster hunters using high-tech weapons and gadgets to battle Dracula, or Dracul, along with the other creatures of the night. And honestly, that's kind of badass. Instead of adapting one old horror movie, Monster Force basically turns the entire Universal Monsters legacy into an action team cartoon, where the good guys look like they should be fighting aliens, and the bad guys are straight out of old black and white horror films. And like a lot of shows from this era, it's pretty obvious they were trying to sell toys. The problem was, however, there were so many shows during this time that were trying to sell action figures that it sort of just got buried. The show didn't do well ratings-wise, the toys didn't really sell, and the show was cancelled after 13 episodes. The worst part is the show got a Volume 1 DVD release with the first 7 episodes, but because it didn't sell very well, the second volume never came out, so it basically flopped twice. And it's a shame because an action-adventure cartoon show that's basically G.I. Joe meets the Universal Monsters should have been an easy win, but I guess there weren't enough monster kids like me in the world to support it. If you do want to check it out, you can find it on YouTube, at least at the time of this recording, though the last 5 episodes don't look or sound nearly as good, since they were never officially released. And that's a look at some mostly forgotten cartoons, for reasons that are sometimes pretty obvious, based on horror and cult movies. If you've seen any of these, or somehow grew up watching them, let me know what you thought of them down below. I'm really curious how many people actually remember these. Anyways, thanks for all the support, I really appreciate it. I hope you're all having a great week, and as always, stay spooky.
Huge thanks to all my channel members, you're the real MVPs of the Spooky Squad. Your support helps keep the lights flickering and the monsters fed. If you'd like to join up and help support the channel, check out the join button below. But no pressure, just watching and liking helps a ton too.